So yes, I'm in my car, but I'm not driving. I just dropped my girls off and they're doing some basketball little program and ran into the bank to put some money in my son's account so he can go get some supplies he needs for a project. And I have a little bit of time, between the waiting for the kids to be done with basketball, and wanted to share some ideas. The first thing that was really coming up for me this morning was my own fear, my own, kind of panic over what I'm doing, this new phase of my work that I'm embarking on, this new offering that I'm giving you, this intuitive artist coming out in a public way by offering up Whole Soul Revolution, a show, right? And as I was, a little bit concerned, let's say, about what is it that I'm going to say? What is it that I have to offer? Who am I? What am I thinking? What am I getting into? I, had a little thought come to me, and the thought was really more of a memory, and I want to share that with you. When I first started doing readings professionally 10 years ago, I had a woman come to me because, I was offering free readings at the time, and she was somebody I knew. And she was so impressed with what I said, which whatever that might have been, I don't remember, that she sent her husband. It was free. Why not? So here he came. He knew nothing about getting readings or anything like that. And of course, the way that I work happens to be question answer based. So of course, he had to come with some questions. Now, in all honesty, I don't remember what he asked, but let's just kind of guess that it was something around his work. Should he continue to do the work that he's doing, or what's his best path, or anything like that? And, it was all new to me, but sure enough, this is when I started seeing the pattern in how I work, that I started to really see people in a very deep way. And so in that, session, I shared with him what I saw in him. And again, I don't remember the specifics. I just remember it was, that he was big-hearted and that he was here to bring a certain energy and gift to the planet. And, it was all yummy, juicy, and to him, probably somewhat impractical. In fact, as he was walking out the door, sort of in this higher state, because I, have seen that happen when people are at the end of their session, it's like, whoo, they're a little bit in the ethers like me. He looked at me and he said, well, what do I tell my wife? And I just was like, that it was lovely. I don't know. But really, his question, and we talked about this more in the parking lot, was, what is he to do with all this information? Here he was, doing his life and doing his job, and it was providing, money for his family and supporting them. And it was quite practical, and may not have been what he loved, but he was good at it. And me telling him all this woo-woo stuff about why he's here and all, it's like, what was the practical application for that? What is he going to tell his wife? What is he going to do with this? What I realized is that when I see people, that's really just the beginning. So that's why in the first episode, I wanted to give you a little inkling of what it is that I see in people again and again and again. And I offered up some definitions. So what I see in me and what I present in many ways is this intuitive artist with these expressions, whether they are doing a reading or whether they are, creating something. In fact, I'm sitting right in front of a craft store here. And so when I'm done, I'm going to go in this craft store. Anyway, so it's this artistic idea of allowing flow to come through us, this, harnessing our creativity and allowing it to come through us. The other was playing with the word channeling. Again, a lot of artists talk about being in the flow or, just really in the zone, whatever you want to call it. If you're a musician or even if you're engaged in a really incredible new work opportunity, a lot of times you can get so focused because you're in the zone. But also I wanted to bring up channeling because so many people put a lot of emphasis on people who know how to channel and they got all this information and I don't have this information. And I just wanted to kind of demystify that. And then, of course, this idea of being a mystic. And again, it's just a word. But it's an important word for me because what it implies is that inner undercurrent, that part of ourselves that is spiritual, that it has come here for something bigger. So like this client, you may be wondering, so what if I'm an artist? Or so what if I'm channeling? Or so what if I'm a mystic? What do I do with it? So my intention, the intention of this show, was not to sit there and just sprinkle you with all this, oh, you are all love, you are all divine, isn't this lovely? But to give you actual tools and support in learning how to apply that, and learning to decide for yourselves, what do I do with that, right? And the reason that I'm doing the show in this kind of a format, where it's a so-called reality format, where I'm, sitting in my car and sitting in front of the craft store and waiting for my kids to get out, is that I wanted it to be accessible and tangible for you, so that you can see that wherever we are, whether we are sitting in our car or whether we are in a group meditation or whatever we're doing, we have access to who we are on a deeper level to pull forth. All right. So I will share with you in this particular episode more practical applications on what to do with it. All right. It won't be like complete by the end of this, little show that you're going to know everything that you should do with your mysticism and boom, your life's going to change. It won't be like that, but it will be sprinkled not just in this show, and I'll focus on it in this show, but it'll be sprinkled, of course, throughout the series. So with that, we'll talk when we get inspired again. All right. So my dog and I just went to the dog park. We had about an hour to spare while we waited for my girls to finish swimming, and now I'm just waiting out in front of the gym here for them to come out. And I wanted to share with you about this idea of bringing that mystical quality into our own lives, and why is it practical and how it could be practical. And of course, this is just going to be a little snippet, because this is really the essence of what I'm bringing through, is this idea of how do we really live into our own lives as spiritual human beings. When I was at the dog park, there was a woman who came over and asked me about my dog and what kind of a dog I have. And we had a conversation around dogs, right? I didn't go into anything strange like, well, did you know that I'm a psychic and I can, have a reading for your dog if you want, which I really particularly don't necessarily read dogs. But nonetheless, it didn't have to come up. It didn't have to be part of our conversation. So coming out of the closet per se doesn't mean that everywhere I go, I have to say, oh, by the way, did you know that I'm an intuitive? Oh, by the way, did you know that we're all made from this, divine source and it's coming through us all the time? No. But what instead I have learned to do is to simply allow that knowing of who I am to just run through my system in a comfortable way, not in a, does she know? Does she not know? Should I tell her? Should I not tell her? It's really not relevant in that situation now, is it? In terms of what I was sharing earlier about this client who said, okay, so what do I do with this? Well, we are always at free will. We don't have to do anything with it. We don't have to do anything with the fact that we know who we are. However, if it feels like we're keeping it a secret, it's doing something to us. It's having us sort of keep that part of ourselves to ourselves in such an uncomfortable way that it starts to show up in various ways. One way it shows up that I see is that it will lead to a sense of feeling isolated and lonely, and that we don't know who to share our truth with. I was in the middle of a sentence when my husband called and interrupted the last video, but I want to continue with the idea of this truth in which is important for us to speak of. So by knowing more about ourselves and by allowing that truth to come through us, we align with our essence. And why this is important is when we hold back our truth, when we don't express it, and I don't necessarily mean at the park when we're, talking to a stranger, but in our everyday lives, then it starts to show up in other ways. So it can show up in a real life crisis, for example. It could be, your marriage is ending, your job is ending, whatever it is, and you're going, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. But it can also show up in these more subtle ways that start to build. So for example, if what you're doing is repressing yourself from speaking your truth, from moving in that direction of saying, this is what I want, this is what I am, then all this energy starts to show up, let's say around that whole throat area of not being able to speak your truth. And you can end up with things like sore throats, or something bigger over time, or just feeling that sense of not being able to really say what I want to say. In terms of not pursuing what you really want to be pursuing because you've denied it and haven't recognized it, it can show up in ways of feeling, just isolated, depressed, separated from what you want, but also from other people because you're not expressing and allowing yourself to be who you are. So in those ways, the practical application is that it prevents a lot of these other things from accumulating and happening later on. So I have a funny story. My husband does home repair, and one of the things that he will get called on are really basic things like, my refrigerator is not working, or my, dishwasher is stopped up. And there's a funny story years ago when we lived in a college town and there were college students who rented apartments. He got a call and they said, I can't figure out what's going on with my tub. It's, it just keeps filling and it keeps filling and I can't figure it out. And I think there's this big blockage. And so literally my husband gets there and he reaches in and he lifts the stopper. And it wasn't necessarily one of those literal little round plug stoppers. It was just flipping that little diverter, or whatever you want to call it, not the diverter, whatever it's called, to let the water go out, to unclog the issue. So it wasn't even an issue. And so here he was, getting paid whatever he was getting paid to really just go and open the valve so that the water can drain. And of course the college student was like, oh dude, and felt really stupid. So my intention is not to make anybody feel stupid. It is to really kind of play with this idea of, do you really have a clog in the pipes, or is it a matter of just flipping it and lifting it and letting it open up and letting the water drain? And that water being our energy, our flow of who we are coming through us. Because if it isn't, it's going to keep filling up, and pretty soon it's going to overflow and we're going to go, oh my gosh, look at this mess. What is that mess? Is it things falling apart in your life? What is that mess? Or perhaps it leads to some other issues in terms of the sadness and such. What I would like to invite you to do is look at ways in which you can ask yourself, where am I not living my truth? Where am I sort of keeping myself hidden or keeping myself contained in some way? And really, they may be small ways, but it's something that you can look at. All right. So I want to take a little bit of time to summarize this week's episode and really go back to that question. What do I do with it? Well, you don't have to do anything because you are always at free will. But what you can do is allow. If you have a sense of who you are and you start to allow that rather than repress it, fight it, bury it, avoid it, it opens up so many more opportunities for you to experience joy. When we are seeking joy, we often in our culture get caught up in seeking simple pleasures, finding something like food or entertainment or companionship that will make us happy for the time being. But when we really tap into joy, it really comes from a place of being free to be who we are in any given moment, when we are giving that belly laugh because we are just so experiencing that moment and not afraid about what people are going to think of us for having this belly laugh, or whatever it is that's coming through us. When we are in that place of allowing our expression to be fully experienced by us in spite of what might be perceived by others or any of our own ego getting in the way, we really open up that flow of energy of who we are to come through in a very natural expression. And as you may recall, that feels good. That brings you joy. So, the practical application doesn't have to be, let's go find my, passion, my job, and go change my entire life because now I've recognized that I have these gifts and I'm a mystic and an intuitive artist. I'm a channel. Oh, isn't this great? Instead, it can be something as simple as allowing me to be me, right? Aren't you ready to allow you to be you? Wouldn't that feel so freeing and so good to just be who you are in any given situation, in any given moment, and just say yes to that? No more hiding, no more being afraid, no more trying to figure out what should I tell my wife or anybody else for that matter. So, just food for thought. See if you can, for the moment, just this moment, breathe into that place of allowing. What would that feel like to really be you? What would that feel like to have access to your gifts? It doesn't have to be anything bigger than simple joy. So, speaking of which, enjoy the week. Oh, and by the way, welcome to my home.